Thank you for joining us tonight for the fourth and last webinar in our secondary progressive MS series, Managing Transitions in Your Partnerships. This webinar series is brought to you by Can-Do Multiple Sclerosis and Novartis. My name is Laura Allen, Programs Manager for Can-Do MS. I will be your moderator this evening. Can-Do MS delivers health and wellness education programs to help families with MS thrive. Please visit the Can-Do MS website, cando-ms.org, to learn more about Can-Do MS's online and nationwide in-person programs. Our speakers this evening are Roz Kalb and Karen Peterson. Roz Kalb is a clinical psychologist who has specialized in MS care, support, and education for over 30 years. Roz was with the National MS Society from 2000 to 2016. She is currently working with the Society as a consultant, and she is also a senior programs consultant on the Can-Do MS team. Karen Peterson is from Yorktown Heights, New York, and her partner Ann has been living with MS since 1997. She will introduce herself shortly. And now, I would like to turn the meeting over to Roz.
Thanks, Laura. And I just noticed that only my name appears under the screen that Karen and I are sitting under, but she's really here tonight. And I'm very, very pleased to be doing this with Karen. For those of you who are able to join the July webinar with her partner, Ann, you're now getting to meet the other half. And if you missed that webinar in July, I really encourage you to look at the archived version of it. Ann and Karen and I have known each other a very long time, ever since Karen encouraged, actually bribed her partner Ann to come to me for counseling shortly after Ann was diagnosed 22 years ago. I'm going to ask Karen to introduce herself in a moment, but first I want to go through our learning objectives for tonight. Our goal is for all of you who are with us tonight, people with MS and support partners, to view the MS experience through the lens of a support partner, as Karen shares a lot of her experiences, and really understand the impact of mood and cognitive changes in particular on a couple's relationship and their efforts to communicate with one another, and to understand how partners can support each other through MS transitions, but also through the life changes that happen in all relationships. We're hoping that people will recognize the importance for support partners of taking care of themselves, of putting on their own oxygen mask first before helping the other person, and also that everyone will understand how important it is to plan when you're living with a very unpredictable disease like MS. So Karen, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and how you and Ann got together?
Sure. I was living in New Hampshire at the time, and Ann and I were introduced by mutual friends over 30 years ago. And as you mentioned, 22 of those years came after her diagnosis. I'm a high school athletic director. Ann's retired now, and I'm hoping to move to that venture myself in a year or so. My job takes a lot of my time. Sometimes Ann takes a lot of my time, but that's the fun part. And when I'm not working, we like to play golf. I like to garden. I like to be in Maine and sit by the water.
And the water's right outside the window here because we are both in Maine doing this webinar with you. So now we have some polling questions for all of you. So first of all, could just give us an idea of who's on the webinar with us tonight. Please let us know if you're a person with MS, a support partner, if you're watching together, or someone else. So the vast majority of people are living with MS themselves, but we do have a few support partners and a few couples who are watching together. Thanks very much. So for those of you who are support partners, the very few who are on, which of the following MS symptoms has been the most challenging for you, your partner or loved ones? Walking or balance problems, mood and cognitive changes, the fatigue that's so common in MS, pain, or bladder and bowel problems? Well, that's an interesting split. So walking and balance problems, mood and cognitive changes, and fatigue. And I think we're going to probably be talking about all of those.
Yes, we will.
So that's good. And the last question is for people with MS on our webinar. Which of the following symptoms have been most challenging for you? Walking or balance problems, mood and cognitive changes, fatigue, pain, or bladder and bowel problems? A similar split, although lots of people talk about walking and balance problems, but then there's a pretty even split between the mood and cognitive, fatigue, and bladder and bowel problems, all very common symptoms of MS. I'm glad to see that not too many people are experiencing the pain that can be so debilitating. Great, thank you. So with that information for Karen and me, that really helps us figure out how we want to talk about a lot of the things we're going to talk about tonight. But I want to talk a little bit about relationships, because even relationships that are the strongest and the best can be challenging, even at times when things are moving smoothly and everything's predictable. But couples who are working to navigate the unpredictable changes that MS can cause, and also the losses that the disease can cause, may find it even more challenging, may find it takes more work to keep their relationship going smoothly. At the same time, we've heard from many, many couples that their partnerships have grown stronger as a result of the challenges they've faced with MS. Their connections are deeper, and their commitment is even more profound because of what they've weathered together. And as they've had to communicate about the challenges that they're having and trying to solve together. So tonight, Karen and I really want to talk about the ways couples experience the changes and transitions that occur over time. As Karen mentioned, it's been 22 years of their relationship where they've been managing MS. So we're going to start at the time of diagnosis and talk through a variety of changes and challenges. But I want to ask Karen first why you were interested in even doing this webinar with me.
Well, both Ann and I believe that if we can help one person by sharing our story, it's been a good day for us. When Ann was first diagnosed, we had to spend a lot of time researching the disease, and there was just so much to try and figure out. And at the time, there was very limited resources in regards to support partners. So I think to really, what I've learned over the years is to really help the person with MS, the support partner needs to take care of themselves and help themselves. And you could be a better support partner that way. And that's one reason I was pleased to come to.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you here. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like for you when Ann was first diagnosed? I don't know if you knew anything about MS at that point, or if you even understood what was going on. What was it like for you?
Well, I mean, it was pretty devastating. Well, it was very devastating. You know, we didn't know much about the disease. I, heard about, a couple famous people that had it, and other than that, we really didn't know much about it. I figured that she would be in a wheelchair within a year, and our lives would be very, very different. And that was a long time ago, but so we had to really dig in and start to research and It was a particularly difficult time because Anne became pretty disengaged and didn't really want to talk to me, didn't really want to talk about the disease. So I did a lot of research on my own at the time. I thought she was just devastated and depressed about the diagnosis. We were all struggling with that. But we did finally come to realize that she was suffering from depression, which was a symptom, one of the symptoms of her MS. In addition, she was having some cognitive issues. Her physical symptoms were balanced, and she had some sight problems and some vertigo. But it was really the cognitive and the mood issues that were the most difficult to deal with. I mean, I could help her walk around, but when she became disengaged from me and our friends and her family, that was probably the most challenging time.
So when you talk about Anne becoming disengaged, and for those of you who met her a month ago on the webinar, she's very social, she's very engaged, she's very talkative. It's almost hard to imagine a depressed version of Anne, but what was she like?
She was pretty miserable. I mean, it was almost because she was miserable, she was trying to make those around her miserable. That took us a while to figure that out, but she would, you know, she didn't want to eat much, not typical Anne. She didn't want to plan. She didn't really want to do anything except for sit in she had a recliner at the time. She was on steroids at the time. We had a Greyhound, so she and the Greyhound would go watch TV, and then she would want to go to bed like at around 8 o'clock at night, and that was sort of the course of our day. In the meantime, I was working and trying to work, so I was trying to work, balance the house, and try to figure out how to make her feel better and sort of start to engage again with me and with our friends.
I know that you two are a very tight and devoted couple, and that you've been together already for quite a few years. That must have been incredibly lonely for you to suddenly not have your partner being a partner.
It was, you know, I still had her, but it was almost like there was a death. Like, you know, it was, she was there, she was in the house, but she wasn't Anne. And I spent a lot of time alone. You know, she would go to bed, I'd be exhausted, but I'd sit up at night and read through MS pamphlets and try to figure out what our next step was going to be, and how we were going to get through the day, you know, and try and wake up and start it all over again. But I missed her. I mean, I spent a lot of time with the cat. She took the dog too, so that wasn't really fair, but we did have a cat, so I spent a lot of time with the cat.
Do you want to talk at all about what that turning point was for you related to her mood? How did you get her attention?
I think it really culminated one night. I mean, it was just, was becoming more and more frustrated. I tried everything I could possibly think of. Usually I could get Anne out of a bad mood, like, you know, in less than a day and before all this happened. And finally I just broke one night and just said, you know, you need to come back into my life or we're not going to get through this. So I'd sort of been protecting her. I didn't want to have that discussion. I was sort of keeping all that in. But finally, she did something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but something set me off. And so we had a heart-to-heart, and she sort of snapped out of it. And that's when she realized, like the next day she said to me, you know, I've been trying to make you miserable and everybody miserable because I'm miserable. So that was a big step for us, but it took a real heart-to-heart and a little bit in your face. Like, this isn't fair to me. We're not going to make this if we don't change what we're doing.
So at the very beginning, did you go to Anne's neurology appointments with her?
Yes, so she couldn't drive, so I had to take her. Our first neurologist was down the city. Then we found a neurologist closer to home up in Westchester County, New York. I went to all those, all of her appointments. I wanted to know as much, maybe sometimes more than she wanted to know or would be willing to listen to. Also, she was struggling with cognition. She couldn't remember things. It was a lot for her to handle. So I would suggest anybody who's newly diagnosed or has to go to the doctor, take somebody with you, whether it's a support partner or a friend or a family member, because it's important that there's another set of ears. And also wasn't engaging with anybody, so I thought if we were going to have a dialogue with the neurologist, I needed to be there.
You were
Yeah,
rallying
I was
the
probably
one,
it. Yeah. So.
Did anybody at that point ask you how you were doing or what you needed as a support person?
No, neither neurologist did. It wasn't until Anne found you and we came to you that you were the first person to ask me that question, but no one before that.
Had you even asked yourself?
No.
No.
No. I wasn't it wasn't about me. That's how I felt. It was about her.
So when Anne first came to see me, bribed by her friends, you came with her, and as with the neurologist, you had to do most of the work. Yes. With me, and was kind of like another chair in the room. Once Anne got comfortable, she started to come to her sessions with me alone. Mm-hmm. And we then had a relationship. At any point, did you ever consider getting that kind of help for yourself?
I didn't at that point. In retrospect now, thinking back, I wish I had. I think I would have been a better support partner for Anne. I think I would have been a little more sane. So I think that, if I had to do it all over again, that's the one thing I would change.
So before we go on to the next polling question, what would talking to somebody have done for you? What do you think you could have done or would have done differently if you'd had a chance to share some of this with a therapist?
I think I could have developed better coping strategies to work with her. And it would have been a chance to talk about me and what I needed to do for myself to take care of myself. Like how was I feeling about her diagnosis? Like Anne never typically asked me that. It was all about how she was doing. Right. There was very little two-way conversation about, I was scared. We weren't sure where this was headed. You mentioned the unpredictability. After she started to see you, she started to progressively get a little bit better, but it was a long haul. And, I felt like I couldn't talk to her about my fears because that would upset her more. Yeah.
So I think that's true of a lot of support partners. It's also true of people with MS that sometimes there's just this communication block because people have lots of fears and worries and strong feelings inside, but they're worried they're going to upset their partner, and so it all just gets swallowed and communication comes to a standstill. So I'm really glad that you guys found
that's why
a way to
I think it's important to talk with somebody outside of the relationship. That's very helpful.
Okay, can we go to polling question 4? So this is for support partners. Again, there aren't very many of you, but we'd like to know what your biggest challenge is as a support partner. Do you find it hardest to ask for help from others, to find time for yourself, take care of your own health and wellness, plan for that unpredictable future, or just deal every day with the MS symptoms that your loved one has? Well, that's an interesting thing. So asking for help from others is definitely a challenge. Taking care of your own health and wellness and dealing with MS symptoms. Does that kind of go with what your experience has been as well?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because the symptoms are, in your face. So, right. So that's usually the first thing that you're trying to take care of. And then asking for help, that one doesn't surprise me.
And sometimes when you ask for help, people don't know how to give it. And so it's frustrating. Okay, for those of you with MS on the webinar, what are the symptoms that are most difficult for you and your support partner to talk about? That MS fatigue, the mood and cognitive changes, sexual changes, pain, or bowel and bladder problems. All challenging topics, actually. Pretty even. So again, we don't have a lot of people dealing with pain, so that's not a challenge, but mood and cognitive changes get the highest score, although it's pretty close with sexual changes, bowel and bladder, and fatigue. So I would encourage all of you to visit some of our archived webinars. We have webinars on all of these topics, and all of the webinars are designed to help you talk about these challenging subjects and give you the vocabulary that you need, and I think you'll identify some of your own challenges and concerns if you listen in. So I urge you to do that.
So Roz, you always get to ask the question.
Yeah,
So
I do. You have one for me.
I do have one for you.
Yeah.
So look, everybody with MS is a little unique in what they're dealing with. Their support partners or family are also unique. You know, I've had my own experience, but what could you tell us that's more general in terms of MS support partners?
So in my time at CanDo, I've had the unique opportunity and privilege to spend a lot of time with support partners, hours and hours and hours. And it's really one of my favorite parts of my work. And we hear over and over that support partners feel proud and satisfied, or they get satisfaction from their ability to support someone that they love. There are a lot of positive feelings. They say that in many ways it's made their relationship stronger, and they feel that that communication or the ability to talk about all the challenges is sort of the key. A lot, as Karen has been talking about, once the dam is broken and you can begin to really share openly what's going on, that is the key to solving a lot of the issues, but it's also very challenging. Support partners also tell us that although their role gives them a lot of satisfaction, they worry about how best to do it. What do they need to do to be a good support partner, or how to be better at it? And they identify strengths in themselves that sometimes they didn't know they had, but they discover sometimes that they have patience they didn't know they had, grit and determination in the face of challenges. And many of them talk about how they've learned to be very creative problem solvers with their partner and themselves. And they feel a very strong commitment. So those are some of the very positive things that support partners have shared with us. They've also shared other feelings. I'm waiting for the slide to change so you can see it. They also tell us, as Karen said, they are seldom asked how they're doing or what their concerns are. I can be in a room with 24 support partners and ask how many of them have ever been asked by a healthcare provider how they're doing, and maybe one or two will raise their hands. So nobody's really thinking about how support partners are doing. They're given little in the way of information or tools and resources to help them do what they're trying to do, which is why CanDo focuses so much on support partners as well as people with MS, because we see it as a shared experience that everybody needs help with. Support partners are at high risk for depression as well as people with MS for different reasons, but there's still a high level of depression and anxiety. They experience a lot of losses in their own lives. They feel that they've lost control of their lives. Some of their lifestyle preferences go by the wayside, their dreams, and some of them feel that their partnerships as they knew them have changed considerably. And certainly they have a lot of anxiety related to the unpredictable future. That seems to be the biggest worry. You know, when's the next shoe going to drop? What's this going to be like for us? We also know that support partners tend to ignore their own health and wellness. Everybody's so focused on the person with MS, and support partners tend to put their own health and wellness on the back burner, in part because time is so limited. They talk about feeling like they have multiple full-time jobs that leave no time for time alone, let alone for self-care or time with friends or hobbies. And they also report feeling more isolated from others. They don't have time to be with friends. Sometimes family, friends, and colleagues distance themselves because they don't really know how to deal with the changes of MS. So support partners are dealing with a lot. So given what we know, I'm going to put you on the spot.
Please.
Yeah. Have you been able to find time to take care of yourself and all this, or do this? You mentioned gardening, you mentioned enjoying the water in Maine, but are you really finding time to take care of yourself?
It's been difficult over the years. I'm getting better at it more recently, but you know, I don't exercise as much as I should. My doctor's appointments sort of take a backseat to Ann's doctor's appointments. My job takes a lot of time as well. So I just recently had hip replacement surgery about a month ago, and I had to, you know, take care of a lot of appointments prior to the surgery. And lo and behold, I found out I could fit it in. I just needed to make the time. And Anne was also very supportive of that, which was helpful. You know, she really wanted me to have the surgery, and so her support was helpful. But I'm starting to learn late in the game that if I'm not healthy, I can't help her. If something happens to both of us, and we're really in trouble, so it is important to try and find that time to take care of yourself.
So, and I don't know if you know the answer to this, but when I talk to support partners, they often say things like, my focus was on my partner, my spouse, my loved one. Those needs always seem to take priority. Why do you think that is? Why does one person's medical needs or health needs or wellness needs seem to take precedence?
Well, I might not have a good answer to that, but yeah. I mean, thinking about it, I think it stems from maybe how the relationship starts to change after the person has been diagnosed with MS, because you immediately, you know, come to their aid, and so that sets up a different relationship dynamic. So it sort of starts there, and then that sort of continues, so that everybody's mindset's the same way. The person with MS is like, my needs should be first, and the support partner a lot of times are, you know, for me it was, I got to take care of Anne, I got to make sure she gets to the doctor. I think it just sets up a different dynamic within the couple.
I think that's actually a great answer, and I think it's true, and if a couple's not aware of it, it can just keep going that way. So from your vantage point now, if you were trying to advise support partners who aren't as far along in the game as you are, what would you try to encourage them to do?
I think having a good dialogue with the person with MS, like start to have that discussion about, you know, we're going to take care of your health needs, but I need to take care of mine. And you kind of have to map it out. You have to plan it. Like, you have to be strategic about it. Because depending on what the person with MS is, if they're symptomatic, what they're dealing with, you know, it was different when Anne couldn't drive. So that sets a whole different dynamic up. But, you know, just making those appointments, even if you have to cancel them, like, make the appointment, try and take care of yourself. Go out for a walk if you can. Like, get out of the house for 15 minutes. Nothing's going to happen, hopefully, in the 15 minutes that you're gone. But, you know, reach out to friends. You know, it was very hard for me to leave Anne alone when she was newly diagnosed. But I tried to carve out 10 or 15 minutes, even if it was just 10 or 15 minutes for myself.
And there was always a dog that needed to be
There's always
walked.
a dog that needed to be walked or a cat. And we, you know, we're very lucky. We had good friends. So and Anne's family was very supportive. So if she couldn't be alone, we had somebody that could come over. And I needed to learn to ask that as well. Even if Anne didn't want that person there,
Right.
Mom's coming over and I'm going out. So that's important as well.
So one great example, when people say that they can't find any time to do any exercise or physical activity, we had a support partner at one of our Can Do programs in Colorado, and his wife had pretty progressed MS, and so he was kind of on call all the time. But he said that whenever he turned on the microwave, he would stop, drop, and plank, which is a pretty vigorous form of exercise. And so then he would plank on the floor for the 30 seconds or the minute or the whatever it was, which he demonstrated in the middle of our support partner group session. But he said he was finding minutes, grabbing minutes when he could do something that, you know, that helped him feel good. So you mentioned that you talked to Anne about this. You actually had a conversation about how to balance her needs and your needs. What do you think it's important for a support partner to ask for from their loved one?
So one of the issues that Anne was dealing with was sort of loss of control when she was first diagnosed. She felt like she had lost control of her world. She was a classroom teacher. She was struggling with that. And what I eventually figured out was one way I could help her and she could help me was if I allowed her to help me. So if I asked her for help, all of a sudden she felt like she was important again, like she had some control. So it took a while, but even, you know, because my job is, I work a lot of weekends and nights, and because Anne was fatigued, we weren't even seeing each other very much. So you know, one day I asked her, I said, you know, if you could just stay up 15 minutes more, maybe you and I could sort of go through what happened to me today, and I could find out a little bit about what happened to you today. But nice. I need like to unwind. I can't come home to an empty house and nobody to talk to. I mean, the cat's nice, but after a while, you know, I'm not getting much feedback here. Right. So that was kind of how we started it. You know, and then physically, as she got better, I would say, you know, I need you to do the grocery list. You don't have to do the grocery shopping, but I need you to start that planning, because those were the planning things that she always did. Or I'd leave 2 phone calls for her to make, which was a struggle sometimes for her, depending on what her symptoms were. But I tried to think of a couple things that would help me and realize that it would also help her as well, because she wanted to be back in control. Yeah. She just wasn't, you know, able to do it fully at the time. So we sort of chipped away at those chores.
That's great. So you mentioned a few minutes ago that you recently had hip replacement. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about what led up to that besides all the pain?
Yeah, so I started experiencing hip pain about 2.5 years ago, and it took me a little while to get it diagnosed and realized it was arthritic hip, and eventually I would need a hip replacement. But then life kept getting in the way, and last summer was dealing with hamstring issues. And so we were sort of, nothing MS related, just, you know, other stuff that happens in life. And so she was doctoring through that. And then I was seriously considering, I had gone to see 2 surgeons and was considering the surgery, trying to figure out how to plan it around my job, around our lives. And then Anne had a fall on the golf course and totally tore her hamstring and had to have surgery. So my surgery got put on the back burner because hers had to happen right away. Mine could wait. But it was, I found it difficult taking care of her after the surgery because my hip was so lousy. So, but it delayed stuff. And so finally and she was very encouraging after her surgery. She's like, "You're next." I'm like, "Great, can't wait." But it's, it's all worked well, but we had some delays along the way.
So as people age with MS, they're also aging. And so one of the things you're talking about now is that you've not only navigated taking care of MS, but you've each had health issues totally unrelated.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that all the experiences that you two have had navigating MS and disease progression did that help you when she was going through the surgery, and then when you had to do the hip replacement? I mean, had you learned some skills or communication strategies that helped you manage those things?
Yeah, I think we did. I mean, some of the things I've already, mentioned. Anne's surgery was very complex, and she was non-weight bearing for 6 weeks, and all of our bedrooms are upstairs. So we had a hospital bed downstairs. So that was a pretty stressful time. But I think some of the things that we learned. So what I learned, and I had to take a leave of absence from work, but I was more willing to ask one of our friends to come over and sit with her for a half hour, an hour. So I could either get some work done or I could get out of the house. So I think we did have some strategies. Anne was very nervous about being my support partner. She's like, "I don't know if I can do it." And I said, "Well, I've been doing it all these years. You can probably do it." So she was okay. Still some work to do, but.
So is that a difference between the two of you, in terms of?
I think it might just be our chemical makeup. I'm not sure, but I think it also has to do with the roles that we've been thrown into. Anne's more like, "Aren't you better yet?" It's a little bit, she encourages me to get better quickly.
Yeah. But you're more of a patient care person.
Yeah, I think it's just I've had that role in my family, before, and a long enduring with Anne's MS, and that's just sort of the person I think I'm more naturally am. She's a little bit more like Nurse Ratched.
We all want a Nurse Ratched taking care of us. I think we want to ask you for your recommendations for others, and then I'm going to add some from our perspective. I think you've talked about most of these. Is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can't stress enough how honest you need to be with each other. And I always say, like, MS is the elephant in the room that sort of gets in the way. And there was for a time there, I really tried to protect Anne. I tried to protect her from MS. I tried to protect her from the reality of having to talk about it. And, I felt bad when I came home with a problem because I'm like, how important could my problems possibly be with what she's going through? But you have to try and maintain your relationship. I tend to be a little bit overbearing. We have to work hard at getting back to our relationship at times because I worry too much. I ask her how she's doing all the time. I mean, think about that. I'm like, it's overbearing. Like, nobody wants to be asked 800 times a day, "How are you feeling? How are you doing? You need to be careful," as well-intentioned as it is. So we sort of tried to come to an agreement that Anne will be honest with me if something is bothering her, if she feels a symptom coming on, or if there's something bothering her, that as long as she's honest with me and we can deal with it, I won't ask her every day. Sometimes
I'm sure that's hard.
That's very hard. It's very hard for me. And I worry about it.
So Anne's MS has progressed.
Yes.
Not so visibly to other people, although some balance problems, and she had mentioned last month on the webinar that she feels her cognition is worse.
Yep.
So what's that been like for you?
It's been hard. So, you know, we always say MS is a journey, right? Life's a journey. We just got MS thrown into the mix. So you know, I can give you helpful hints from Karen here, but it constantly changes, and you sort of have to regroup and sit back. And we're at that point right now. I mean, I would say the last year has been challenging for us. We both had surgeries, but also for me to, you know, see her walking with more difficulty, concerned that she might fall. You know, I always tell Anne that, and she's a little stubborn, so, you know, we've talked about maybe using a cane would be helpful, and she's not doing that. So then we have to sort of go back to the honest conversation, and I have to say to her, look, you don't maybe want to use a cane, or you don't want help doing things, but if you hurt yourself, I'm the one that takes the brunt of it. So it's not just you. And Anne's the first to say that, you know, MS is a we disease, not a me disease. So we have to continually regroup and try to go back and, you know, communicate with each other. Because, you know, this will continue to change. We don't know what else life will bring us. But that piece is important. That communication piece is constant work.
So if the cognition is gotten worse,
Mm-hmm.
does that challenge the communication, or does it challenge your relationship in other ways?
Yeah, it challenges the communication because what we've noticed is I'll have a discussion with her, and then she'll ask me the same question tomorrow, or we'll go back and I'll say, you know, we've talked about that a couple times. Then I find myself like not being as patient as I probably should be. So that's a challenge too. I can get very short. I find it frustrating.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a time where Anne doesn't really pay attention. That has nothing to do with the MS. She just doesn't pay attention to me. Right. So there's been times when I talk to her and she just doesn't pay attention. So of course she doesn't remember it the next day. So I've had to try to sift through that. And I'll say to her, I'm like, did you just not pay attention to me, or did you really forget? She gets very upset by it too. So again, there's that honesty piece that rather than me ignoring it and trying to push it under the rug, I've had to say to her, you know, I think this is a cognition piece and we need to talk about it. So it's constant.
Mm-hmm. So if you look back now, going back to my first slides about support partners, are there ways that you would say that dealing with the MS has really tested your partnership and also strengthened your partnership?
Yeah, I think the testing part, I think, has really been how it changed our relationship with each other. Just that dynamic of, like, I wasn't a care partner before. Like, right. You know, we sort of took care of each other when somebody had a cold, but so the dynamic of that, I think, has been the most challenging because it's sort of who you identify with after a while. It's like, and then you're like, I don't really want to be that person all the time. Mm-hmm. So I think that's been the challenging one, and that does affect our communication because the dynamics are different. I find myself telling her what she should do. Nobody wants to hear that. So that's probably been the toughest part. I think where it strengthened us is the same thing. It's the communication. So I think we talk more honestly through other issues in our lives mm-hmm. than we would have if we hadn't had that challenge.
And I think the two of you bring a lot of strengths to this journey, as you call it. What do you think are the strengths that you each bring to it that have made it work?
Well, I just, you know, we do like each other, so that helps.
Good.
Yeah,
that helps. A lot. Yeah.
You know, we both like to have fun. Humor has gotten us through a lot. We try to laugh at things when we can. We enjoy each other's company. We like doing the same things, and we've had to modify what we're doing a little bit. We've been fortunate to not have to modify it too much. we have some great friends. So our lives are fulfilling, you know. It's just we have to continue to make the adjustments.
You do have an incredible support network, and I think that that's one of the things I see is that support part, that the support network really is flexible in the sense that it can support Anne in moments when she most needs it. It can support you, and it can support you as a couple. And not everybody's fortunate enough to have that kind of a network.
Yeah, we're very, very lucky, and I'll have friends that will just call me out of the blue and ask me how I'm doing, or they'll say, "Call me when Anne's not home and let's talk." So I mean, we're very, very fortunate. I know some people don't have that support around them, but we do.
Well, thank you for sharing all of this. I really appreciate your honesty. I think we have time for some questions, Laura. And before that, just some recommendations for those of you who are support partners. And for people living with MS, these are support partner recommendations. So take them to your partners, spouses, relatives, and friends. It is vitally important for support partners to have a GP and to see that GP once a year, to get the regular health screens that are so important for everybody. Manage your own chronic health conditions, whatever they might be, because as Karen has said so well, you have to take care of yourself so that you can be a healthy person and also so you can help your loved one. Trying to make sure you get the sleep and exercise and physical activity that you need, and a healthy diet. And lastly, but certainly not less important, pay attention to your own mood, because again, support partners experience a great deal of depression and anxiety that can benefit from some professional help.
Hi. So I want to thank you for having me back. It's been thank you for such a great webinar. It has been a pleasure to get to know both you, Karen, and Anne, and it's really special to see the different perspectives that you both have as you take this journey together. So thank you for sharing your perspective. I think that you have a lot. Probably a lot of our audience has a lot in common with the things that you are going through as a support partner. So with that, we did get a number of questions, and you know, we do get this question oftentimes, Roz, because we talk about support partners. And this gentleman wrote, "My wife, who was supposed to be my caregiver, recently passed away. Is there any suggestions that you can provide how he can deal with his MS now?"
That's a good question and a tough question. The very first thing that I would suggest he do is to contact the National MS Society's MS Navigators. So that the number is 1-800-344-4867, and we can make sure that people get that number. But the MS Navigators are all trained, usually as social workers or counselors, and they're very familiar with MS and with the resources in communities around the country. So if you're in a situation like that, depending on how emerging, whether your needs are emergencies or not, you can still contact them, ask them to help you identify what options you might have for getting some help, assistance, or services in your home. Again, I don't know enough about you to know what kinds of caregiving activities your wife did, but the MS Navigators can talk you through all that. I'm so sorry for your loss, and I'm sure this must be some scary as well as a sad time. So please contact them and let them help you identify those resources.
Great. Thanks, Roz. I think this is a question that we can get a perspective from both you, Roz, and from Karen. And one of the support partner writes, "How do you prevent yourself from becoming resentful if the family member chooses not to learn about MS? It's hard to get the family to empathize with her husband."
So the question is about extended family?
Correct. Like the family, they're choosing not, she's the support partner, and her family members are choosing not to learn about her husband's MS, and she's becoming resentful. So how does she stop herself from becoming resentful?
Do you want to take that first?
Well, I could. So Anne's family wasn't exactly like that, but Anne protected them a little bit, and I thought that they should know as much as they could, you know, about MS and about Anne's particular issues that she was dealing with. So I had some discussions with them. I tried to find maybe one or two people in the family that were a little bit more willing to listen. I also, you know, dropped pamphlets around the house. At the time we had pamphlets, you know, the internet wasn't real big, but, you know, it was difficult. It was probably a little easier because Anne didn't want them real involved, but
you did.
But I did, right.
Right.
So, it's hard not to be resentful. It's hard not to feel like you're not getting help from them, but you also have to realize they're struggling as well. So maybe they need some resources to talk with. You know, I did talk to some of Anne's relatives about some resources that the MS Society had, or maybe they needed to go to talk with someone because it's, you know, it is can be a family disease, and everybody's dealing with it in their own way. So those would be some suggestions, but you might feel resentful, and you should let yourself feel resentful for a few minutes. Okay?
I agree with that. I think it's okay to feel resentful. You just don't want it to weigh you down when you have so much else that you're trying to deal with. I think that families sometimes pull back or seem disinterested for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they're frightened by it. They don't understand the disease. They don't want to come close. They worry that they might catch it. Sometimes parents feel very guilty. They feel that they must have done something, that their child got MS, and so sometimes they're in denial and staying away because of their guilt. Sometimes family members stay away because they're afraid you're going to ask for help. They don't know how to help, or they don't have time to help, or they don't have financial resources to help. So they stay away for that reason. The most common one that I see is that people don't know what to do or what to say. They feel awkward. And the longer they go without saying anything or talking or offering assistance, the harder it gets to break that ice and start to talk about it. So I think Karen's suggestion of giving them some reading materials to read on their own at their leisure, the society still produces those brochures, they're still there, they choose to read them or not. You can't control what they're going to do. If you do need help or assistance, it's a good idea to be very specific in your requests. Don't just say, I wish you would help. Say, this is the kind of help I need. On Tuesday afternoon, I need somebody to take my husband to the doctor because I'm unable to do it that day. Or I need somebody to come and stay at the house because I have to go on a business trip. The more specific you can be in your requests for help, the easier it is for people to accommodate. But as much as you can, I would try to find out what it is that's causing the distance and the unwillingness to learn, because it can be a whole slew of different reasons that you'll never guess at.
Great, thanks, Roz. We often get this question, Roz, where do I find a therapist to talk to that knows about MS?
It's a great question. And again, the best answer I have is to call one of the MS navigators at the society, because they maintain a huge database and will be able to help you identify therapists in your area who have some experience and expertise in MS. Depending on where you live, there are There may not be very many of those, but the other types of therapists who can be very helpful is anybody who specializes in health psychology or chronic illness and disability, because a lot of the issues are very similar. So even if they haven't worked specifically in MS, they know issues around chronic illness. The other resource I recommend is a website called Help Pro, one word, HELPPRO.net. And it is a website where therapists list their services. You can see their pictures, you can see where they are, what their special focus is or their special interests, what kinds of insurance they take, whether their office is accessible. So helppro.net is another way to look on your own for a therapist, but absolutely going to the National MS Society first is the best way, because they have relationships with a lot of those therapists around the country.
Great, thanks, Roz. Karen, we all know that people, our support partners, are all at different stages in their journey with their partner that has MS. So this person writes, I am new to all this. My boyfriend has MS. We just started dating, and I know everything has been very overwhelming to him. What is the most important thing that I, as a caregiver, can do to lift some of the weight off of his shoulders right now?
Well, I think, if you can help them navigate through, so there's so much information that you want to figure out, and there's lots of information out there now. So helping him to navigate through some of that might be helpful, because it's overwhelming. It will be overwhelming for both of you, but when you're the support partner, you can step back a little bit and help sort through some of that information. So, and I know what Ann and I did is we tried to prioritize, or at least I tried to prioritize what was the most important thing. So finding out as much as we could about the disease, finding out what treatments were available, making sure that her symptoms were being taken care of. So, and allowing him to talk about it or not talk about it, just be in the room, and offering, the time and energy to talk about it if that's what he wants to do. But it's a lot at first. But, I think really what helped Ann and I to kind of get through that was to really set some priorities, because it's overwhelming. It's all consuming. It consumes your whole day. And also don't let it consume your whole day. Like, go do things that you both enjoy doing together. Try and take a break from it. It's always there. It's always lingering. But, if you like to watch a movie together, like, do those things. Try and find time in the day and the week to do those kinds of things. It will fall in place. You'll figure it out, but it is overwhelming at first, for sure.
I could not have said any of that better, but even as a person at the very beginning of this, paying attention to your own feelings and needs. If you need to talk to somebody to sort out your feelings without worrying about it upsetting him, make sure that you do that. You also, as a support person, can call the National MS Society and talk to one of these trained navigators about what you're going through, what your needs might be. That those people at the end of the line provide information, they provide support, they identify local resources. I mean, it's just a magic number to call, whether you're a support partner or a person with MS, and they can also help you both sort out the good information from the not so good information. Because as Karen has said, now the internet is just full of information, and you want to make sure that you're zeroing in on the information that's accurate, that's up to date, that's not just trying to sell you something. And so the navigators can help you both do that. But what I like most about what Karen said was you're being present. you're being there, whether it's to talk or not to talk, to do something fun together or just to sit and watch TV or whatever. Your presence is probably one of the most comforting things going on right now. So
Great, thank you. Roz, we often talk about genetics as it relates to MS. So this person writes, why is it that I am the only one in the family that came down with MS? Everyone in the family has been tested and they don't have it.
So we don't know yet why a person gets MS. We know that it takes a certain combination of factors, some genetic predisposition, some environmental factor that the person comes in contact with at a particular period of time, probably before adolescence. And those things have to converge in a very particular way for a person to get MS. 60% of people with MS do not have a family member who has it. 60% of people with MS are the only person in their family. But there is a genetic component to this. So there are some families called multiplex families in which lots of family members have it. And the geneticists are really interested in studying those multiplex families to identify what the common genetic factors are that show up in this family, because that will help us identify what might cause other people to get it. And there are several hundred gene variations now that have been found to be related to MS, but that genetic predisposition is just one piece of the picture. So you're like 60% of the people with MS. There's nobody else in your family that you know of who has it.
Here's a question that comes up often. Someone writes, I have MS. My husband doesn't want to talk or see a therapist, but we need to. So now what?
That's not an uncommon situation. So my best suggestion is to go ahead and start on your own and hope that your going and talking will end up being helpful to both of you. The other thing is to point out that when you get diagnosed with a chronic illness, you need some guidance, you need some coaching. So it's not necessarily that you have a condition, a mental health condition that requires psychotherapy. You may just need somebody to help walk you through the grieving process, the coping, as Karen mentioned, how to learn what are some effective coping strategies when you're living with life challenges. And so when I look back over my career as a therapist in MS, most of the time I wasn't being a therapist, I was being a coach. I was accompanying people on the journey that Karen refers to, providing information, providing resources, answering questions, helping people sort out their feelings. So one doesn't have to be worried about that it's going to be this deep, long conversation about your childhood and your mother and your, whatever growing up. It's just talking about how to deal with life's challenges today. And sometimes if you go ahead and start yourself and you bring home some good tips or strategies, your husband might gradually get the idea that this is a safe and okay thing to do.
Great. We talked, I know, Karen, you mentioned that Anne is no longer employed. So the employment issue is a big one. One of our participants writes, it has been rough dealing with the loss of income. My husband has been unemployed for more than 5 years. We applied for SSI, and after 3 years of appeals and going in front of a judge and hiring an attorney, we were denied the benefits. Any recommendations for dealing with the Social Security Administration and getting approved for benefits? My husband feels guilty that he isn't able to provide any income, and I don't want to complain about it because it will just make him feel worse.
That's a very difficult and stressful situation. Without knowing the ins and outs of your husband's MS, it's hard to know on what basis Social Security denied the application. I think there is a booklet that we put together at the Society, which is, it's a guide for healthcare professionals and people with MS to use together to apply for Social Security disability. And it tells you what the requirements are, what criteria you have to meet, what the doctor has to document. Sometimes it is denied not because you're not disabled, not because you're unable to do your job, but simply because the medical records do not adequately document progression of disability and current inability to perform on the job. So I would strongly suggest looking at this workbook, which is available on the National MS Society's site. And then if you call the National MS Society, that same number, and you ask to speak to one of the employment specialists, that person will be able to help you figure out if you have tried every possible route, if you have any other strategies you might want to try. And without knowing more about the details of your disability, that's really all I can say, but the employment specialist will be able to spend time with you and figure out what options you might have.
Great. Roz, one of our participants did write in and say that the resource that you mentioned, HelpPro, is helppro.com. So I just want to reiterate that.
I apologize. Thank you. Whoever wrote that in, thank you for telling us that. Important correction.
And sticking on the resources, one of our participants asked if you could repeat the navigator number.
1-800-344-4867. The other reason it's a magic number is that you can also request a free financial planning consultation. There's a group of certified disability financial planners who donate their time to give people affected by MS a free consultation on what to be thinking about in terms of financial planning for the unpredictable future. So if you call that number and say you're looking for a consultation, they will set you up with somebody. You can pretty much ask them about anything and be directed to a very helpful resource. 1-800-344-4867.
Great, and I do agree, it's a terrific resource. We have time for one more question. So one of our participants is asking about caregiving burnout. So I might want to start with Karen. And have you ever experienced caregiving burnout, and how did you handle it?
I'd say yes, I probably have. Probably on a number of occasions. I think really the best way I've found to handle is to go do something that I need to do for myself, whether it's disappear for a little while, whether it's to do something that I really enjoy that helps me sort of recenter. For me, that's usually working in the garden or getting out in the water or doing something like that. But it happens repeatedly. And it's, you know, that's the best way that I know that I've dealt with it is I got to take a break. I have to call a friend. I think that's a show, right? You call a friend, one of your lifelines, or go do something that you really enjoy to do for yourself and take a break.
I think you've also said a couple times tonight that you have asked Anne for help.
Yes.
And I think in addition to reaching out to friends, it's important sometimes to say to your loved one, I need to talk about me right now for a minute, and I need you to hear me because I need your support, and hope that your partner is able to give that. I think the other thing is that I'm going to tell you to call that number again. It is for support partners as well as for people with MS. And you can say, you know, I'm kind of up to here. I've had it. I feel like I don't know what else to do. I'm maxed out. I need some help. And they will figure out some resources for help. The other thing I say there are lots of different symptoms of burnout. It can be depression, it can be overwhelming anxiety, but if you're feeling like you are engaging in unhealthy behaviors, you're drinking too much, you're taking drugs, you're talking or behaving in ways you wouldn't want the neighbors to see, those are not signs that you're a bad person. Those are signs that you are maxed out, that you have reached your limit and don't know what to do. And that is when you need to reach out to a friend, to the National MS Society, to your religious advisor, to anybody, and say, I need help. I am doing more than I am doing, and I feel like I'm at the end of my rope. It's speaking up that will help you get the help and support that you need to do a tough job.
Great. You know, I'd like to end on a positive note. So I'm going to ask Karen, because we've been so enjoyed hearing your story and also hearing Anne's story. What is your favorite activity that you and Anne like to do together?
Probably, we like to travel. So I'd say that's probably our favorite. And we like to play golf. Neither one of us have been able to do that this year, but Anne's back playing and I'll be back playing soon. So we're horrible at it. But we like being outside, and we like hanging with friends. That's what we like to do.
Well, that's fantastic. And summer is a great time to hang with friends.
Absolutely.
So again, thank you for sharing your story. Roz, thank you for participating in this webinar. This has been a terrific series and I've really enjoyed being a part of it. So as we conclude, I would like to inform you of some resources that you might find informative and helpful. On the CanDo MS website, cando-ms.org, you'll find our archived webinars, our e-news, our library articles, and CanDo On Demand. You can also submit a question to the Ask the CanDo team, which will be answered by our team of MS experts. You know, people often ask us how they can get involved in CanDo MS. One great way is to start a fundraiser. 100% of the donations will go back to fueling life-changing programs. It's a campaign that we have called Kick MS. We also sell loci bracelets on our website, and $1 of every teal MS bracelet goes back to CanDo MS. You can do monthly giving. It's something that you can find information at on our website under donations. And here's a really neat trend that's happening right now. You can give up gifts. So Facebook have a lot of people on Facebook are asking for donations instead of getting gifts for things such as their birthdays or anniversaries. So I would encourage you to think about that trend as you are having an occasion coming up. I would like to mention that this was a 4-part webinar series, and all of the webinars are going to be archived on our website. The first 3 have already been archived, and this one will be archived by the end of the day tomorrow. So I would encourage you to watch if you've missed any of the webinars in the series. It was quite a spectacular series that was presented. I would also like to thank Novartis for partnering with us on this webinar series. And finally, as we conclude, I would ask you to take part in the survey that will appear on your screen immediately following the webinar. And again, I'm going to thank Roz and Karen for participating in the webinar tonight. But most importantly, I want to thank you for being part of our webinar, asking questions, and being an interactive member of this informative webinar. So good night, Karen and Roz.
Good
Good
night,
night.
Laura and everybody, and thank you for joining us.
Good night out there. I hope you all have an enjoyable evening.